Evening, man. Good evening, everybody. Hey, I'm so excited again. I just want to welcome you guys back to the Conversation 98 just for another episode. And I'm really excited today. Really excited. I mean, we back again, like I promised. We got some more special guests. We got a very, very special guest today. Somebody that we go way back. I mean, way back. I mean, matter of fact, this person that I'm talking about, I've known her over half of my whole entire life. That's how long we go back. But I'm excited about today. I'm excited about the conversation tonight. And man, I really look forward to just the conversation and just the time and the talks, what we're gonna have going on. Again, man, make sure you guys share this. Make sure you guys let me know that you watch it. Let me know where you watch it from, where you're tuning in from. I want to give a special shout out to my brother, my big brother Obadiah Brown. OB, he's the big 5-0 today, so I want to give him a shout out. I love you, big bro. And also want to say heavenly birthday to my aunt Estelle Williams. That she was the auntie that loved on everybody, kissed everybody, everybody loved her. Make sure you guys share this again. Let people know where you watch it, where you're tuning in from, and feel free. I mean, feel free to make comments and interact. Also, man, go like my page, the Conversation 98 page on Facebook, and also like the YouTube channel, the Conversation 98. This will be uploaded also with some clips. Just want to spread this out and make sure everybody is knowing what's going on. I'm going to share this just a little bit more, and then we're just going to get in and bring our very special guests in. Very special guests. So tonight, man, I'm excited again, and I look forward to this conversation, because I feel that this conversation is a very much needed conversation that impacts a lot of people. And my whole goal with this show and the content on this show is just to make sure we talk about issues that people are dealing with, that they may be dealing with in silence, they may be dealing with and people not knowing, or they may be dealing with things and in silence, feeling like nobody else is dealing with the same thing. So this subject tonight is one that I wanted to bring up, and I'm excited. So without further ado, I want to bring in my special guest tonight, Rochelle Thomas. And I would say, how are you doing today?
Hey, everybody. I'm doing quite fabulous. How's everybody out there in live land doing today?
Hey, it's good to have you on. And I'm excited. And like what we was talking about before, you know, we go back 22 years. 22 years.
Yep. 2000.
2000.
Killeen, Texas.
Good old Killeen, Texas. Bravo Company, 124th Signal Battalion, 2nd Platoon. I remember it. Hey, and we was in the B3 section. Then they moved me to the CN section. So, like, listen, I know, and one thing, hey, I appreciate you. I appreciate you, because one thing about it, and what I loved about you, and what I still loved about you, was at that time, you know, young adult, met you, and you was really like a mother figure, like in a sense where, like, one thing about you, straight up and down, anybody that know you, you gonna give it to them straight up raw how it is. Ain't gonna be no chasing. And I appreciated that about you, and I respect that about you. And tonight, man, I just wanted to start this off with this conversation. And tonight episode, we want to talk about the power of acknowledging and addressing the impacts of generational trauma. The power of acknowledging and addressing the impacts of generational trauma. And Sandra Lopez says she sure was or is mama, auntie, all in. Listen, I would just tell you, one thing I'll say about that is when multiple people can say the same thing about you, that shows the consistency of who you are. And I know we done our path and crossed with a lot of people. We done worked with a lot of people. Our paths are crossed with a lot of people. And consistently, it's been the same. But I really want to just jump into it. Can you tell a little people about you, about your background, so they can get to know who you are?
Okay, so I am, first I'm going to say this. I'm originally from Valdosta, Georgia. Like, I'm from South Georgia. Like, you can't get no closer to the bottom of Georgia than where I'm from. And I served in the military for over 20 years. I have 6 kids, 2 biological. I'm a grandmother of 3. I am currently a licensed professional counselor in the state of Georgia and South Carolina. I work at in the community with at-risk youth. This conversation is kind of near and dear to me because of where I work and also because of where I'm from. So that's a little about me.
Yeah. So I do like that when you said about, where you work and where you're from. One of the things about it is, me, I've always had a passion for people and helping people. That's just a part of my DNA that will never change. Even if I try to change it, I don't feel comfortable with it. So I just have to deal with it and live with it, right? But, the power of acknowledging and addressing, the impacts of generational trauma. And the reason why I bring that up is a lot of times everybody has something that they have to deal with. And I think when we say generational trauma, I think what people would naturally do is thinking that something real bad, or like we think trauma is something that's like real on the extreme side. But a lot of the stuff that people deal with and have to carry themselves are things that come in subtle ways, or they may not be what we consider like the murders or all of this stuff, right? But it's a lot of things people deal with. And like when you just looking at numbers, like if you look at numbers, and my sister specialized in the sexual assault and domestic violence thing, like 1 in every 3 females have been molested or raped. 1 in every 6 males have been molested or raped. That's just that. Now, when you start going down the laundry list, it's a lot of stuff that happen to people, but that doesn't mean that the trauma in this of itself doesn't mean that it has to be considered extreme to have a major impact on you.
No, it doesn't. So trauma comes in, let me give you a little quick definition. Trauma is an event that began decades prior to current generation and has impacted the way an individual understands, copes, or heals with something trauma. So let's talk about a little bit about symptoms of trauma. So we can, and symptoms are byproducts of other things, or they can be things that's direct, such as low self-esteem.
Yep.
Depression. So I said I was from South Georgia. So let's talk about depression. So you know how you got this person that just can't, they just always tired, they don't have no energy to do nothing. They always sad, they withdrawn. Or maybe you got this person that's, they drinking all the time. They're a functional alcoholic. They going to work. They doing what they got to do, but they dealing with stuff. Now, where I'm from, you don't got time for that. You got to get over it. You got to go to work. You got a family to feed. You got stuff to do. You don't have time to be depressed. Now, imagine you a kid living in the house with those symptoms. Yep. Well, it's some trauma there somewhere, but it wasn't physical.
Yep. Because guess what, though? Like, I'm glad that you brought that up, because just because you didn't experience the trauma yourself, you can be impacted by it, because when somebody dealing with traumatic things, and like what you said, people they've dealt with trauma themselves, so that now they're operating, they're a functional alcoholic, or they're dysfunctional person that's living in depression, and they've been told just deal with it, just get over it, and they trying to provide, they trying to go out and do everything. Their children grow up in that environment. So because they refuse to deal with it, that same trauma is transferred because it's never addressed. And it impacts the lives of those children. And if that doesn't go addressed, it transfers to their children's children. And that's when we start talking about things like generational curses, because that trauma is transferred because it's never addressed or dealt with.
Yep. And we call that environmental trauma. It didn't directly impact you, but because of the environment that you grew up in, it is directly impacting you now. So, we have, you and I discussed this earlier, functional dysfunction. You're doing so well functioning in dysfunction that you don't even recognize that it's something wrong with you, or that you dealing with something. You dealt with it so long till it's acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. So you know what? I'm glad you brought that up. This made me think about it, and I talked about it before on this show, right? And I'm just going to use a biblical reference. So the man that had the man that was at the pool of Bethesda, the Bible said that he was there for 38 years. And for 38 years, he was there waiting on somebody else to stir the water, right?
Stir the water.
So waiting on the angels to come down to stir the water. He was waiting on somebody else to put him in there.
Yep.
Now, when he had an encounter with Jesus, Jesus didn't even ask him to tell him what he had to do to get in the water. He just asked him a question. Do he want to be made whole? When he said yes, Jesus told him to take up your bed and walk. Now, the thing I want to talk about that bed is what in the same thing is that bed was symbolic of the excuse or what his identity, what he was identified by.
Right.
Because everybody was saying he was that dude that was always on that bed. He was laying there. Yeah. Jesus, in turn, told him, and the Bible talks about him telling him, hey, you got to deal with that excuse. You got to deal with that. You got to take that up and you got to walk. And what I like about that in that sense, and when we start talking about trauma, a lot of us, that bed has become our identity.
Yep.
That bed has become what we begin to identify ourselves by. And when that bed becomes our identity, we expect others to do for us what we have the ability to do for ourselves. We have the ability to do for ourselves, and that is address it. Address it. So what is so powerful about getting the courage to address your trauma?
So understanding what your trauma is or how that trauma came about is very important because, like you said, it becomes our identity. You get, for example, you say, I grew up in a house with alcoholics, or I grew up without my father. You wear that like it's a badge of honor. But behind all of that, that's an excuse for you not to excel or to acknowledge the things that hurt you. It's okay to say that I didn't have my father in my life, but identify who you did have in your life.
Yeah.
It's okay to say that my family has alcoholics in it, or my family has drug addicts in it. Identify how that impacted you and move forward. Just because that is that's a label. We won't even call it a title. That's a label.
Yeah.
You can peel it off and put another label on. I know you got a biblical reference for me. Come on with it.
Yeah, but you know that the thing about the identity piece, and I'm glad that you're talking about that, where we can use that as a label, right? It's a natural thing. It's a natural thing to blame somebody else, or to find something else to blame, to just in an attempt to try to justify us not doing something. And I made a post earlier today. The biggest hurdle that if we be honest with ourselves, the biggest hurdle that we have to overcome is our mindset.
Definitely.
That's the biggest hurdle that many of us, if we really be honest with ourselves, the biggest hurdle that many of us have to overcome, or the barrier that we have to overcome, is our mindset. Because our mindset to ourselves, we lie to ourselves more than anybody else. So we want to find an excuse. Well, I didn't have my dad. I didn't have this. I didn't have that. So that is the reason. That is my why I'm not accomplishing what I know I can accomplish on the inside. No, that ain't the why. What it is you don't want to do the work. And you want somebody to feel sorry for you. But newsflash, the world don't care. I ain't saying that the world do not care what you didn't have. Nobody cares. And I'm not saying that in a negative way. I'm just saying that from the reality of the world perspective. The world don't care what you got to overcome to get the way you can, get the way you want to accomplish. But you have the ability to overcome if you choose to face it.
If you choose to face it. Just because something happened to you doesn't make it who you are.
Yeah.
You can be more than just what you identify as or what you label yourself as. Identifying that, say for instance, I say I have depression. I understand what depression is. I understand what depression looks like. But dealing with it, doing the work to get past it is what I have to do. I can't just keep holding on to that label and expecting change. You can't just keep saying I'm having problems, but you're not doing the work to get to make something happen. You have to do the work.
That's why I said not only the power of acknowledging and addressing, because there has to be some action behind it.
Oh, definitely some action behind it. Identifying it. So let's talk about you've heard the term poverty mindset.
Yeah.
A poverty mindset doesn't necessarily mean monetary.
No.
Not at all. It does. Okay.
So just like I know, I'm a psychology major myself. So in sociology, they call it a culture of poverty, where you have people, when you start talking about, when you go into, just say you go into the projects, you talk about people that live in the projects, you got generations of people that live in the projects, right? And sociologists define it as the culture of poverty, to where people develop a certain mindset to where they are comfortable with that, and they are afraid to even do anything that would take that benefit from them. For example, I don't want to make more money that would disqualify me from getting this benefit. Even though I have all the ability in the world, but I still want all of the shiny things. So I chase those, but I do everything else possible so that I can stay right there.
Right there.
And that's that mind. But that goes to what you were saying.
Acknowledging it and addressing it. If you acknowledge that this is where I am, address how you want to get from where you are. You don't have to stay there. Acknowledge it. It's okay to say I have depression. It's okay to say I have anxiety. It's okay to say I grew up fatherless. Acknowledge it. But now you're going to acknowledge it. How you going to address it?
But I have a question though. But what if I want to acknowledge it, but by me acknowledging, I feel like I got to attack or address my family or those that are close to me. You see what I'm saying? So go ahead.
Acknowledging that there's generational trauma what happens to you will impact others that come behind you. But right now you're working on you. I can't fix what somebody else didn't do. I can't fix what somebody else didn't give me. All I can do is love you where you are. But right now I got to work on me.
Yeah.
I don't have to say, well, because so-and-so did this, and this. It's like church hurt. I can't blame every church for what I didn't get at another church. I can't blame every minister for not being who I needed another one to be. I just got to deal with me. I can't blame everybody else.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because many times, and I spoke about it on the show a few weeks ago, many times we feel as if I deal with something that one thing I realized, and I shared it, my mom made this comment. She said, it's okay to acknowledge, but you must move past it, right? One thing I would say with that, and me and my mom, we have many conversations. There's a lot of stuff that I grew up with my mom, the teachings of my mom and my dad, that I realized wasn't for me. It's not a knock on my mom or my dad.
Right.
I just realized it's not for me. I know that there's a lot of things that I brought my children up with that's not going to be for them. That's not an attack on me. That's just not for them.
Right.
At the end of the day, whatever issues that may have come from that, right? I hope, my prayer is that they can address it, or I can address it in a way to where I'm not attacking the person, because sometimes we deal with trauma that happen to us and it's not intentional.
It's definitely not intentional. It's not intentional. It's a lot of stuff. It's like, so I work with youth in the community, and a lot of the youth are dealing with stuff that has happened to their parents or in their household that they can't even acknowledge because they don't recognize what it is.
Yeah.
For instance, a lot of my kids are, they've committed crimes. A lot of my kids come from broken homes. A lot of my kids live in foster care or in group homes. And in their mind, I'm just surviving.
Yeah.
I'm just surviving. But let's acknowledge how you got to that point where you had to just survive. Let's talk about how you got there. Now you understand that you survived, and let's understand what it took for you to survive and why you have to survive at this point. Let's understand that so we can move past it. Things that happen to, like, I have a youth that, a kid that his mom has never had a job in her 36 years. Never worked. She's been on every benefit that she could ever be on. And that she's ruined that so she can't get on them. So what she does is she guilts him into providing for them. Now he's 14. How much providing can he do at 14?
Yeah.
You asking a 14-year-old to do what a grown man should be doing, but because you've never had an example of what a grown man should do, you're putting that weight on the child. Now he breaking in people's houses, he breaking in people's cars, and if you want to own this, if we really want to own this, his father is in jail for the same thing. It's environmental. It's a trauma. It's a trauma that happened that wasn't physical. It's environmental. It's societal.
And listen, I'm gonna read this comment, but I'm gonna come back to that one. My mom said, absolutely, take care of you. She said, on an airplane, we are instructed in case of emergency to take care to ensure you get your air supply correct first,
right,
before helping others. Heal thyself first, then you can provide assistance for others to heal.
That's now, right.
But what I really like about the example that you gave is that is symbolic of what happens a lot, especially in American society, in the African American community, to where that, and I'm just gonna say it, that mom is passing the responsibility place. Oh, I'm glad you said that. I really want to address this. I really do. You know, sadly, there's a lot of people that are traumatized because their parents passed responsibility on to them, which forced them to carry a burden that they was not mentally prepared to carry. So it robbed them of their childhood. It robbed them of a lot of stuff.
That's the first thing they got robbed of, was being
robbed of their childhood. So as they get older, because that is never addressed, right? Then they feel like now they get robbed of their childhood, so they go out and they start doing grown folks stuff. And they doing grown folks stuff will have grown folks consequences. So now they got kids.
Yep.
And then now they are upset because they never dealt with that trauma of that responsibility being passed on them. So now what they do is they subconsciously transfer it to their kids because of the environment that was created in.
Yep. They unintentionally, the first thing I told my kids when I had kids and they were old enough to understand, you didn't ask to come here.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't ask for me to be your parent. But I asked for you to come here. Maybe not knowing the responsibility I would have for you. But now that I have you here, I owe you. I owe you. You don't owe me nothing, but I owe you the responsibility to be the best person that I can be for you. Now, what you do with that after I've given it to you is on you. But I cannot not do right by you. It's not your responsibility to pick up the burdens that I fail at. I learned my parents are my mom is very much into the church and my dad is not.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a bad thing. That's two different things you get to learn from two different people. But my dad has always told us, grown folk decision, grown folk consequences. If you do it, take responsibility for it. Acknowledge your responsibility. Acknowledge where you fall short. He always says, acknowledge where you fall short. You can't walk around here blaming other people for what you didn't get or what you don't have. Go work for it. Acknowledge your fault. It's the same with this trauma. Acknowledge where if the problem is with these kids we raising today. Let's stop saying, oh, that's just a bad kid. Or let's stop saying, oh, he can't be fixed, or something is wrong with him. Let's stop saying that. Let's say, hey, what is it I can do for you? Let's talk. Let's have a conversation about this. Meet me somewhere so we can talk about what's going on, because I don't want to see you take this path. Let's acknowledge that.
Because like what you said, though, you know, grown folks' decisions have grown folks' consequences. And a lot of the things with that is you're talking about meeting people where they are, like meeting them where they at, and helping them take ownership of the role they play. Because see, a lot of times it's easy because what happens is this, right? I had recently had a conversation with my son, and one of the things we talked about is, you know, I said, hey man, I advise you, like you're at the age, you're 18.
Yeah.
I'm an advisor because I'm not going to tell you what you will do And the reason why I say that is because I want every decision you make to be your decision.
Yep.
Because every decision you make, you got to deal with the consequences.
Definitely.
So
definitely,
I want to equip you to make that decisions because you're going to have to deal with reap those consequences, either good or bad. And we had to get to a space where we help people acknowledge, like, guess what? I did that. This is a role I played in it. I got it. This is what happened to me. This is what my mama didn't do. My daddy wasn't there. All of this laundry list of things of what happened. I get it. But now, what did I contribute to that?
Exactly.
And I need to start addressing that so that I can start on my process to heal, to address what was done to me.
Exactly. We can go back to when you said, if somebody came to me and said, if I bring this up, I got to talk about my family. You don't have to talk about your family. You could talk about situations generally to address your trauma. But if it's like, I'm not a Bible scholar, but somewhere in the Bible it says that if your right hand offends you, or if your brother offends you, or somebody offends you, go to that person and say to them. You don't have to tell the whole world that this is what so and so did to me to get it, to fix it. Go to them and say, hey, I'm trying to work on myself. I got some things going on, and I feel like they started right here. So can you and I have a conversation about what I feel like happened? Because sometimes it's miscommunication.
Yes.
Sometimes it's a lack of understanding.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just a lack of not knowing. Just not flat out. You just don't know. You just making a lot of assumptions.
But you said something. And I talk about this topic, and I'm just throwing myself out there being transparent. I talk about the issue that I had with my father, my dad being a minister and stuff like that. And I didn't come to the revelation until literally it was 2001. I was 21 years old in Killeen, Texas, living down in that apartment that I was in. And I didn't come to the revelation that I had an issue with my dad until I asked God, why am I the way I am? And the Holy Spirit revealed to me that I had an issue with my dad. With me, I was telling him, no, just, that's just what boys do. We don't listen. I like, but he started revealing to me the real issue that I had with my dad. And I had an issue with my dad from me being a little boy, desiring my daddy to be there for me, but not seeing my daddy choosing to operate in the capacity of being a pastor, with being there for other people, but he was never at my games. You see what I'm saying? Those type of things, that it bothered me. But I grew up acting as if it didn't. Yeah, my daddy was present. My daddy was there, but I felt like he didn't make me a priority. And that manifested itself in a lot of things, because guess what? A lot of my actions I started to do started to compensate for that void that I had. But I tried to cover up with other stuff.
Okay, so I'm not going to remind you of you and I had a conversation. We was in the field. This was like 2001. We had a conversation about this, and it had to do with some people that we worked with. But we're going to move past that. We ain't going to talk about it.
Yeah.
Identifying that you had an issue with him, first with yourself, helps you to move beyond that. Because now I'm grown. Like you told your son, I can't tell you what to do, but I can advise you. But acknowledging that you had this issue with your father and being man enough to listen, sit down and listen to the Holy Spirit. See, that's something that we won't do. We'll take it upon ourselves and be like, you know what? I own mine. When God talks to me, I'd be like, all right, Lord, you sure you got the right one? Because just, we might need to think about this a little while. But you have to acknowledge with yourself that this is really bothering me. And then accept that, okay, it's bothering me. And I'm not being disrespectful by going to my father and saying, hey, when this happened, I feel like you chose this situation over me. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's talk.
And I'm gonna tell you what God did in that situation. I remember even before when I left, it was 2 weeks before graduation. I came home and like I used to do, I got in, went back in the back, told my mom, hey, mom, dad, hey, I'm at the house, whatever, boom. My mom told me, she said, my dad started crying. It was 2 weeks before. Now, the only time I know my dad to cry in my life was when my Aunt Mickey died, when my my grandmother passed, and that time right there, I was 18, 2 weeks from graduation, because my mom said my dad was like, my son is gone, right? And I think it hit him that he missed out on a lot of opportunities. Now, what he did though, towards the end, what happened was this. I started seeing a difference, but he realized he missed out on some moments. Now, with all of that being said, God healed that relationship. My mom said, I ask God all the time that he has the right one. Does he have the right? Oh man. But I would tell you what I realized with that was, because I had the courage to start acknowledging and addressing it, it began to allow my heart to be able to receive the truth. Because the truth was, my daddy's actions wasn't malice. He was doing what he felt what he's supposed to do.
Right. His heart was in the right place.
His heart was in the right place, right? But his priority was in the wrong place. And what I got realized was my daddy is human.
Right.
And then guess what? When I say my daddy got a second chance, he got a second chance with my niece and my son. When I say he knocked it out the park,
hey,
listen, 100%. And God allowed me to see through that I saw the change in my dad's heart by me seeing that healed my heart. It really healed my heart. And that's why I said, you got to first be able to have the courage to acknowledge it. So once you acknowledge it, what you will find is that gives you the strength to have a different perspective. Because if I never acknowledged that, I wouldn't have been able to receive the truth behind it.
And if you had never acknowledged it, he wouldn't have never felt like he did that. The divide would have been there, but would he have understood where the divide came from?
And then
he never would have understood.
My mom said this. My mom said, plus I wanted my dad, what I wanted from my dad, he couldn't do. Now I'm gonna say this, and I said it before, I'm gonna say this. My idea of a son and a father was like, we was gonna play sports together, we're gonna throw the football, play basketball, all of that. Like, that's what my idea was, right? And I had a right to desire that from my dad. But the reality was, my daddy was anti-athletic, like anti, right? And like, I remember playing basketball with my dad. He came out back to play basketball with me one time. And I was like, I'm glad that, like, no, this not gonna work. But what God showed me was everything that I desired from him, I got from my uncles and my granddad. I got all of it. I didn't go lacking. I just didn't get it from the source that I was expecting it from.
Right.
So I had to heal. Like, I had to acknowledge that to be able to see, because the Holy Spirit broke it down. You didn't go without. You just didn't get it from the source that you had the right to desire from. But also understand that he's human. He made a mistake. His heart was in the right place. But when he got a second chance, when I say he knocked it out the park, I mean, knocked it out the park.
That reminds me, this conversation, everything generational doesn't necessarily mean it happens in your family. It's like during a time period. Yeah. And I'm not going to move to politics, but let's just talk about Roe versus Wade for a brief little second there. Mm-hmm. That is very impactful. How many people are having to deal with something that happened?
Yes.
Not necessarily to them, but maybe around them.
Yep.
Or let's not, we don't even have to talk about the impact of what that has to do with women. Let's talk about the impact of what that has to do with that child that's born from that wasn't wanted in the beginning, that could have been from incest or rape. That's some trauma that child is going to have to live with. He's labeled, or she's labeled now. Mm-hmm. Now you have this kid and I don't want it. They go into foster care. Now we're talking about a whole different set of parameters that's on this child that he or she gonna have to live with. Everything we do throughout life has an impact, good or bad.
Yeah.
We have to weigh the consequences, acknowledge it. Let's acknowledge that this is real and we are impacting real lives. It's like, every time I got ready to deploy, I had an attitude. I know everybody that's done deploy had an attitude, but every time I got ready to deploy, I had an attitude. And my attitude was, they shuffling us around like chess pieces on a board because it doesn't impact their lives. You sitting up here in White House, you making these decisions based on some parameters that I have no idea about, but you don't know me, but I know you, the person standing next to me. I feel what you feel. I hurt when you hurt. It's more than just saying you my battle buddy. This is real life. Everything going on around us impacts us. Generationally, environmentally, societal, it all comes back around, and we have to acknowledge it and address it if we want to fix it.
Yeah.
If we don't want to fix it, we can address it and be like, all right, well, I talked about it, and then we'll just move on.
But okay, I'm gonna ask this question. So what about those who know that they have been impacted by their trauma, right? They know it, right? But they don't want to address it, but they want everybody else closest to them or around them to compensate for it and cater to them, choosing not to address their issue or their trauma.
So we have a term for that. It's called narcissist, but that's another show. Another show. Those people have that's a part of their identity now. They don't want to move beyond that. They want to use that. They want to weaponize it. Let's just call it what it is. It's something I can hurt you with. The victim mentality, just like your mom said. That's I want somebody else to be responsible and accountable for how I act. And I don't want you to call me on it. I just want you to accept
it. That's so powerful because you know what, like my mom did say, she said, you know, that's that victim mentality. But one thing that I learned myself, like, and I stand on this, and I ain't saying this in a disrespectful way, but you know, I'm not responsible for your trauma. I'm not responsible for your healing. I'm responsible for my trauma. I'm responsible for my healing. So if I choose to walk that journey with you, I will walk it with you, but I will not walk it for you. You will not make that burden my burden. Because there's a lot of people, like what you said, that have a narcissistic mindset that will try to put that burden of their trauma on you for you to care for them, while they refuse to even acknowledge it or deal with it themselves. And at the first inkling of you making them accountable, they will turn it around on you and attack you as if you attacking them, but you're protecting yourself from them, trying to put that burden on you.
Definitely. Let's talk. So with that thought in mind, let's see, you getting in a relationship, you finna start dating, and you haven't dealt with your trauma. You married now, got a whole husband or wife, but you haven't dealt with your traumas. So now you expecting that person to just deal with it. You just got to accept it. It is what it is. I was this way before you met me. I was this way when we was dating, and now it's a problem for you. It's a problem now because every day I have to deal with something somebody else didn't give you or didn't provide for you. But let's acknowledge that. Let's identify what that is. Because if I truly love you and I want to be with you, I want to see you get better. But it has to start with you. So you can address it with me, but first address it with yourself.
But listen, you hitting on some stuff. My mom said, you can't walk it for them. What you do is extra work without an end. Yep. And I'm glad that you brought that up because, you know, that's like, first of all, I'm glad you brought it up. When you say, and we talk in terms of relationships, right? Because all of us bring baggage into a relationship. All of us bring stuff into relationship. I don't care who you are, what degrees you have. I don't care what experience you have. We all bring baggage into a relationship, right? The key is, like what you're saying is, how much are you willing to, like, you can't come in with your suitcase full and try to overflow my suitcase and then come to complain to me that why your suitcase heavy. Like, you got to carry your own weight. You got to deal with your own stuff. You got to be willing to say, hey, I do have this issue, and acknowledge it when it comes up, instead of acting like you don't. Because nobody need to feel like they need to walk on eggshells. They need to be able to address the issue. But and I also too, when you have people that's not willing to address the issue, when you start talking about the issue, because they identify by the issue, they take it as if you're attacking them.
You are attacking them. So you taking my label off of me. You got a problem with me. It's like, you have those people that can't have a conversation without raising their voices. That's that impact that trauma had on them. So I got to be louder than you to get my point across, because that's the only way I'm heard.
Yeah.
I got to tell you to carry my suitcase because it's too heavy for me. I got to put all of that on you because now I'm your problem. They didn't help me. They didn't fix me. They didn't listen to me. But now we together, so it's your problem. So I'm not going to carry it. I'm going to give you 2 suitcases and I'm not going to have any.
But guess what, though? You give me the suitcase, but then I want to tell you how to carry the suitcase.
Oh, definitely. I'm going to tell you how to carry the suitcase because I know how to carry it because I've been carrying it a long time. So I can teach you how to carry my problems. I'm not going to fix them. I'm not going to listen to you tell me about them. I don't want to hear about them, but I'm going to tell you. It's just like the being the passenger on somebody that's speeding in the car. They driving fast. You mashing them imaginary brakes. I'm going to drive for you. I'm going to tell you how to drive over. I don't want to drive. I don't want to get behind the wheel. I just want to sit over here in the passenger seat to tell you how to drive.
I remember in the 90s, they started coming out with the backseat license. They sell them at the store. At the convenience store, the backseat driver's license. But we're laughing, but that's the same thing. Those are people that are not acknowledging and addressing the impacts of their trauma. No. Because you grew up in an environment to where, people had to scream and yell and cuss people out. I didn't grow up in that environment. So why are you bringing that energy over there to me? I ain't had nothing to do with that. I didn't have anything to do with that. I'm not bringing that to you. Why are you bringing that over to me? Why you have the mindset that you have? You need to address, okay, guess what? I don't have to be like that in this environment. And a lot of people don't want to do it because, like what you said earlier, they're comfortable. I'm comfortable with that. That's just who I am. That's how I identify by. But now, bro, and I'm gonna say this, and I want to hear your perspective as a woman, right? I ain't gonna say a lot. I mean, because when I say that, there are many women who develop the mindset of a quote unquote alpha female, right? And they develop the mindset because they grow up in an environment and they see that, hey, if you're a woman, nobody gonna help you. You got to get out there and get it on your own. Because they may have grew up in an environment where they had a single mom, the dad was a deadbeat or whatever, didn't help out. Now they get in a relationship with somebody who comes from an environment where they've seen structure. They know, they come from an environment. They're coming from an environment that the man has an understanding of, being a team player or whatever. But they fight tooth and nails because they are fearful of, quote unquote, letting their guard down. Because if I let my guard down, then it's not going to be done the way I want it to be done. But they don't realize the impact of how that destroys or erodes that relationship, and acknowledge the fact that, guess what? You need to deal with your mentality coming into that relationship.
So I grew up with a lot of women. Like it wasn't because men weren't there. It's just it was a lot of women in my family. There's a lot of women in my family. Strong, hardworking, driven alpha females in my family. But we all have a place. Acknowledge, just because that's how you was raised doesn't necessarily make it right, and it doesn't necessarily make it wrong. Yep. It's just you have to understand what your role is in this. I can't expect you to be who I want you to be because that's not who I married. If I wanted to marry somebody just like me, I would have just married myself and not you. Why would I want to marry somebody I'm telling them constantly what I want you to do? I need to identify, first of all, where is all this coming from? Like, why I gotta be in charge? Because if you think about it, some labels that we put on women, they always angry. They always want to be in charge. That gets tiresome. If you want to go into a relationship being an alpha female and you want everything to be the way you want it to, expect to be tired. Because you want the whole load, so expect to be tired. Identify what that is that you feel like you have to carry. I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong. I'm saying understand why you feel like you need to carry that whole load, why you need to be the complete boss. Understand it. And then ask yourself the real honest question. Do I really want to carry this load by myself? Because that's the impact of being the alpha female, dictating how everything gonna go and how everything gonna be. That's your weight.
And this not, and I'm glad you brought that up, but this is not an attack on females because
definitely not.
No, but what we're talking about is addressing those traumas. Like you can't come in. There's some dudes who grew up in an environment where it was severely dysfunctional, and you had a chauvinistic and just a domineering male figure in the house, and you come in with the expectation as if that's what a woman's supposed to do. That's her place. Yep. Like, bro. You need to address, you need to deal with yourself. You need to start addressing, okay, guess what? Why do I think the way I think on this one? Is this even healthy? Matter of fact, what did I enjoy being in that environment that I grew up in? And start really addressing those things and talking about it, because guess what? You're bringing your trauma into the relationship and expecting somebody else to cater to that and adjust to that. And like what you said before, that's a narcissistic mindset that everybody else need to adjust to me, because guess what? I'm the most important.
I'm the most important. Even with men, if you grow up in a house and you got a 2-parent household and the mother stays at home and the father does all the working, ask yourself if that's a load you really want to carry.
Yeah.
Because everything falls on him. If she's at home all the time, that means he can't miss no days at work. You can't expect him to go to football practice because he got to go to work. You can't expect him to come to games because he got to go to work. Not even if you have a 2-parent household, or you grew up and your father was in a different house and you was with your mom, and they're not together because he put his hands on her. Now, there's another load he's carrying. If I hit this woman that I'm with now, because that's what I learned from my father, I got to worry about the police.
Yep.
Ask yourself, is that the load that you really want to carry? Acknowledge what it is. Don't label it something else because that makes you comfortable. Be uncomfortable with identifying what it is. Say what it is. And then if it's not, once you acknowledge what it is, ask yourself, do I really want to carry this load? Because if you think about trauma and you think about the traumas that you have, ask yourself honestly, how long can I continue to carry this load? That's why we have high suicide rates.
And I'm so glad you brought it up, because there are many people who trauma that they deal with is them making a decision to carry a load that they mentally, physically, and emotionally not able to carry.
Not able to carry.
Because they don't want to acknowledge or address something that may have happened to them. So they just say, you know what? I'm going to carry this full load of, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to work, and my wife ain't going to work, and she going to be at the house. Well, you ain't built that way, because of, guess what? The dollar amount changed, everything else changed, the dynamics have changed. Yep. Well, you also then on the other side, and you carrying all this stuff, and by you carrying all this stuff, you're not mentally, physically, or emotionally ready to carry it, and you walk around in silence, but you feeling overwhelmed, and you're depressed, and you're dealing with suicidal ideations, and now you're taking that frustration out on your family, because guess what? You're frustrated, your kids feel it, and it perpetuates the same transfer of energy onto your kids. So now that's where the generational trauma is passed on.
Indirectly, this kid is learning good work habits. You going to work, you working, you making stuff happen for their family, but the child does not see the weight that's weighing on you.
Yep.
I said this to one of my friends the other day. The biggest mistake I ever made as a parent was not allowing my kids to see my struggle. That's the biggest mistake I ever made as a parent. Not letting them understand that with hard work comes high expectations. The harder you work, the more expectations other people have of you, the more you have of yourself. I learned a good work ethic, but what I didn't learn was balance. Because I work. And then I was tired. There was nothing in between work except tired. Once you learn that you don't have to carry that load, that you don't have to be depressed, you don't have to be the sad, you don't have to deal with those people that traumatize you. And I don't mean traumatized in the sense of physically. I mean those people that traumatize you with the way that they carry themselves, with the way that they go about their daily life. Once you acknowledge that I don't have to deal with this, you can move forward. Once you start addressing this stuff, acknowledge, first you got to identify what it is. That's the first thing you got to do, is identify what it is. Once you identify what it is, you can move forward, because you're not going to fix it. You can't fix everybody, but you can fix you.
Yes.
You can fix you. Identify what it is. Address it. Call it what it is. What they say, call a spade a spade. Call it what it is. You can be mad about it later, but say it is what it is.
So I said this, you just hit something. I said something on one of my shows a little while ago about balance, right? And I think that when we say balance, naturally we think balance of equality.
Yeah.
But it's not equality. It's more on balance. It's equity. So this is what I say about that, right? We only have so many hours in a day. Eight native. I split it up into the third or four. You got 8 or 6, right? I may not get 8 hours with my kids during the day. I may not get 8 hours with my spouse during the day. But the time that I do have with it, it's 100% dedicated to them, and that time is maximized. And what you talked about earlier about balance, right? And I'm glad you said that about being a parent, because we get out there, we go hard in the paint, and we try to do it, and we want our kids to know, hey, look, but they need to see that real. They need to see what it's like. You know what I'm saying? Like for real. Like I remember surviving off my Star card, because that's all I had and I'm going to the shopette to buy groceries so me and Robert could eat when I was a single dad, right at the groceries going out on Tobacco, at the shopette going on Tobacco Road when I was at Fort Gordon, going in there buying ramen noodles and buying cereal at $5 in there, just so, because I had a Star card, just so we can have something to eat for the rest of the week. Like, I know what that's like. You see what I'm saying? But it's your kids need to see that, but they also need to see you exercising balance in your life.
Definitely. Them Star card days, brother. Acknowledge it. If I could go, like I see them posts where, like, if you could go back to 19 whatever year and change some things, I would go back so my kids could understand that just because you work don't mean you have it all figured out. Just because you working don't mean you got a whole bunch of money. My son told me one time, you got checks, you got money. I was like, well, I wonder where he heard that from. But that's another show. But he got, in his mind, he believed that I could do anything.
Yeah.
One time the lights got cut off because I was in the field and I forgot to pay the light bill. But then forgetting to pay the light bill, I forgot to have the money to pay the light bill with too. So I didn't have the money. So he was just flipping the switch up and down. I was like, we playing hide and seek tonight. Instead of just being honest about I couldn't pay the light bill, we're going to play hide and seek tonight. If I could teach those lessons to my kids then, they would be in a better place now. They would understand that even with hard work comes hard choices. With hard choices comes other things that you got to find that balance with making the right decision for everybody and not just yourself. Acknowledging that this is going on and that the only way this is going to get better is if I address it. I can keep ignoring it, but that doesn't change it.
But you know what, though? What happens, and I'm asking this question, but what happens when you finally choose to address something you've been ignoring?
Well, 2 things happen. You feel relieved.
Mm-hmm.
1, you are relieved. And the second thing is you actually deal with, you accept it. Acceptance.
And then the other thing, I add a third one. The third one is this: you realize that it wasn't as hard as you thought it was to deal with it.
Not at all. Not at all.
You're like, bro, I done wasted 15 years, and that's all I had to do.
And the hard thing, I mean, it's saying that you like, I've been mad. I've been carrying this around with me for so long, and I've been wanting to get it off my chest. And then it's just some miscommunication or a lack of understanding. Or you saw something in your eyes and you believed it was, that's what it was, when it really wasn't that. And all I had to do was just address it. All I had to do was address it.
And that's why the Bible said, and all that get understanding.
Get understanding. You don't get nothing else in this world. Get understanding.
And that's, and I'm so glad that you came on today and shared it, because that's the power that's in acknowledging and addressing it, right? Because when you acknowledge and address it, what happens is this, right? You'll realize how much power you have, because, right, even though our healing can be divine, we still got to take the faith to take the first step.
Brother, you said a mouthful then.
And because a lot of times we have created this thing as if, yes, there are miracles that happen, right? But most of the time, the miracle is in the strength that is given to you to take the first step to activate your faith, to activate the faith of, hey, I'm going to apply this method, to activate the faith of, I'm going to connect myself with somebody. I activate the faith of, I'm going to sit under somebody to learn something a little bit different, to activate the faith to say, you know what, I'm going to do something different. And listen, I believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, but it doesn't even matter if you don't believe. You got to activate the faith enough to say, you know what, I'm going to put forth the effort, the work. Because the Bible said faith without work is dead. I can't expect to be healed and not be willing to put in the work to be healed.
Exactly. And you know, like you said, a lot of people they'll start to tune you out when you start to talk about God. But let's just be honest about this thing right here. You don't have to acknowledge God, because He's gonna still be there.
Yep.
You don't have to accept that He real. You can call Him faith. You can call Him by a different name. You can call Him whatever you want to do. But the one thing you won't call Him is late or never on time, because He's always on time. You got to do the walk. He'll let you take forever. He'll let you take as long as you want to do the work. But you going to have to do the work. You going to have to step out on faith. You going to have to admit that this is, okay, I hear you, God, but let me go on and do this, because I got to do this to make it happen for me. We talk about free will. I think that's what y'all church people call it, free will. Like God gives you, like everybody's like, well, if He didn't want this to happen, He'll do this, that, and the third. Now He letting you make a choice.
Yep. Divine will and free will. Yep.
He letting you make a choice.
Yep.
You can go on your whole life talking about this trauma or this situation. You can go your whole life blaming other people, but until you address it, the impact of what it has done to you and it's going to do to your kids, because it's going to do it to your kids. Indirectly, it's going to happen. You're going to have to decide to do the work. You're going to have to step out on faith and do the work.
Listen, you just said something. I want to say this. Just because your kids have left your house and have moved on and there's years between, that doesn't absolve you from the responsibility of the environment that you set, that your kids, that the transfer of your emotional trauma was transferred to them. And I think a lot of times what happens is when the kids get to a certain space that they want to talk about and address it, the parents or the people in that position feel like they get indignant, like, you can't say nothing to me. That's your problem.
We shut down. We don't want to hear that. I don't want to talk about that. That happened in the past. It's over. It's done with. You keep that over there at your house. That's what we say. Keep that over there at your house. We don't want to talk about that. I don't want to acknowledge that. We done lived through that and we done moved on. That does not change how your child saw it. 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, let them have their say. That's not disrespectful. That's called getting understanding. That's addressing the situation. And
if you are that person, if you are in that situation right now and you don't want to address it, it's because you never addressed it. You never dealt with it. And that's a trigger for you because you feel like they're bringing up old stuff, but they're bringing up stuff that needs to be healed. And a lot of times, God will use your kids to help you heal.
Oh my. Oh my.
He will use your kids to help you heal, to help you get to a space to where now you can start acknowledging and addressing something. And that's why it's so important. That's why I will continue to always talk about healing. That's why I always talk about forgiveness, always talking about restoration, is because there's some power in that. And a lot of us choose to live miserable lives because we refuse to address the thing that bothering us.
Yep.
And we just have to just address it. Address it. Addressing it is not attacking anybody else. That's saying I'm going to choose that my life for me, I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to address it.
Yeah. And addressing it doesn't mean you're going to fix it. But you addressing it saying, okay, this is happening.
Listen.
That don't mean it's fixed.
I'm glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that because listen, just because God may heal you, or just because you may go on a process of healing, some processes of healing is infinite. That means that you have to learn how to manage it.
Right.
You got to learn how to manage your triggers, because that doesn't mean that. That's why the Bible make a reference of a thorn in your side. Like there's some stuff that you got to manage, because guess what? It ain't just I dealt with it. If I don't continue to manage it, that thing can pop back up and rear its ugly head.
Coming back. It's coming back. Addressing it does not. I'm telling you, I'm a counselor. I work outside in the community. I work with at-risk youth, but I have my own practice where I work with individuals. Your parents are still your parents. If you have issues with them now that you're older, you had issues with them when they were younger, your parents are not going to stop being who they are. But as long as you've acknowledged that there's an issue or there's a concern or there's a trauma, you've acknowledged it, you've addressed it, don't expect to change them. Don't expect it to be fixed overnight. It's continuous work. Counseling is continuous work. You don't have to go see somebody all the time because that can get expensive. But what you can do is continue to work on yourself. Continue to acknowledge that it's bothering you. And then you decide how you're going to fix it. Because just when something is bothering you, you don't have to keep dwelling on it. Okay, this is bothering me. I'm going to address it. And I'm just going to move on.
Listen, you just said something, right? Don't condition your healing on somebody else's reaction or somebody else's acceptance to you addressing whatever the issue you may have with it. Because if you condition your healing on that, your healing is right now, you have given up the ownership of your own healing and put it in the hands of somebody else.
You done gave your power to somebody else.
You done gave it to somebody else. This
trauma is when you holding on to trauma, you allowing a situation or circumstance to control you. Yes. And not acknowledging allows it to continue to control you. It still has power over you. Ask yourself how long you going to give somebody else your power. How long you going to allow that situation, them circumstances to control you? How long are you going to just continue to wallow in this situation when, just like you said, it wasn't that hard to do. I just needed to address it.
Listen, I'm so glad that you came on. I got to have you back. We're going to come up with something else to talk about, but I really, really appreciate, you coming on and not only just talk about it. I want people to understand she is a licensed, certified counselor. Like this ain't, and I talk about this all the time. I'm all about seeking help, and especially, prayer, exercising those things, those principles, those biblical principles.
Yeah.
But God give people, he trained people in certain professions to help people. And like, as a counselor, I'm a huge advocate for counseling. Huge advocate, because we need to talk to somebody.
You need to talk to somebody. That's right. Your mama said living rent-free in your life. Don't live.
How long are you going to allow the trauma to live rent-free in your life? And that's the point that we all got to get to. And when I say trauma, listen, if it's negatively impacted you, in some way, form, or fashion, it is traumatic.
It is,
and I'm not trying to I'm not trying to oversell it or undersell it, but we all got stuff. Like, listen, some people struggling with the fact that they never connected with their dad. Their dad, you know what I'm saying? They never connected with their mom, or they may have had an absent parent, or they may have been given up, or whatever it may have been. And they can even be in an environment to where I would say this. I say this. My grandfather, my great grandmother gave up my grandfather because he was in, both of them. She was in an abusive relationship, and he was abusive, very abusive towards my grandfather. So my great grandmother gave my grandfather up to a lady, Lil Mama, that's my mama called her, and Players, which was her husband. They couldn't have kids, so they accepted my grandfather in and loved him to death. Right? Their love, what they gave him, helped him heal. Because I will tell you this: my grandfather eventually, the same stepfather that was abusive and took his food and fed it to the dogs and made him sleep underneath the house and all of that stuff, my grandfather wouldn't let him be put in a nursing home before he passed, moved him into his house and took care of him.
Because he addressed it.
He addressed it.
He acknowledged it. He dealt with it.
Yep.
And he moved on. His life was so much better. Somebody loved him enough to take all of that hurt away, and he didn't carry it in his heart.
Yep. Listen, he addressed, but he better than me. Tell you that right now. Hey, I probably wouldn't abuse him. I probably would have paid that nursing home bill, but me bringing you in my house, listen, after you made me sleep underneath the house, but listen, but just like what you said, he made the choice to choose to heal. And, you know, and he carried some stuff from that. He still has some stuff that he carried from that, but he was able to manage his trauma.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's what I say. He was able to manage that. And thank you so much for coming on. It I really enjoyed this. And listen, I remember you brought up something. We was talking, we was in the field, we was on Post Oak Mountain and on Fort Hood when we had that conversation.
Yeah.
We were sitting outside. Well, in fact, we were, if I'm not mistaken, I remember in the tent, it wasn't a guard shack, it was a sleep tent. We was over there by the sleep tent.
Yep. We had that conversation. Yep.
Anything you got to say before you go?
I used to be one of those naysayers and say, you know, I don't need counseling. I don't need no help. I know that sounds foreign coming from a counselor. I don't need to talk to nobody. I'll figure this out for myself. But what I learned was when you find you somebody that will sit down and give you healthy advice, healthy boundaries, healthy understanding, a lot of the load that you're carrying, you can put it down. Go see a counselor. Find you a friend. Get you a confidant. Even if you have to go in your closet. Find you some peace. Find you some peace. It's about the peace for me.
Hey, and like I said, I appreciate you. Like you tell me all the time, I'm very proud of you. Listen, you're doing something that you don't have to do. You're doing it because that's something that you feel like you need to do. You've always had a heart for people, always been helping people. And I'm glad and proud to see you continue to help people. Even when it pisses you off, you still had a heart to help people. So,
well, hopefully some of them people watching us tonight, they probably still mad at us for the stuff we did. But you know what? It was all with a good heart that I did it. And hopefully they looking at us and they understanding that everything we did came from a good place.
Yeah. So, hey, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I appreciate it. See you guys next week. God bless.
All right. Have a good evening.